All right. So, good evening, everyone. I know that there's probably some more people that will join us all along the webinar. At any point, if you do have question, feel free to unmute yourself or type your question in the chat, and it should give me a notification so I'll be able to answer your question as we go. And there's also going to be an amount of time at the end of the webinar just for your question. So most of you here today, I had the pleasure to met your horses. However, there is people that I haven't met yet. So if you're one of them, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I am Jessica. So I help horse owner to gain their confidence by understanding their horse at a higher level. So I have a diversity of certification. However, I mainly have two line of services. So my first one, my older one, which is my horsemanship program slash Liberty. And what we're going to talk about tonight is actually about my second line of services. It's my Train Smarter program, which is my different approach to horse training that I have learned from my studies so far in biomechanic, or what I like to call the patterns of moving of our horses. Right, so let me share my screen with you. And new. Okay. Can somebody send me a thumbs up or just unmute to make sure you're all looking at the slideshow? Thank you. Awesome. So the conversation that we're about to have today is mistakes that I basically made for years and that I wish would be common knowledge. So in 2017, I was at a point with the horse on the picture where I was basically looking for what I called a body miracle. My horse was born with I would say, less gifted body postures and conformation. But she had so much drive into her, but her body she just couldn't carry a rider at the way too young age of 16. And this is what actually pushed me to go further and to enroll to my very first course of biomechanic. The course is still going on and it's called Straightness Training. It is from a woman in Germany that is called Mary Kay. Um, and so this is where I started, and I had huge aha moment going through that course. And a lot of it's that people think about just that word biomechanic, and it just seems like something so complicated, but it's actually a lot more simple than we think. And it is just a change in our focus on how we look at our horses and aiming on quality instead of quantity. Each big aha moment that I had, and I still have some, but I definitely in those first few years had huge amount of it, and it completely changed the way I look at horse training. And I had a lot of anger also towards not having heard anything like that before. Um, Most of the concept I'm going to share with you is actually quite simple, and I couldn't believe that I had an Equine Canada license and that nobody even told me about a six of the stuff I'm going to tell you tonight. So I hope that give you some willingness to learn a little bit more about it, try some stuff that I'm going to talk about tonight, And see that you do not need a PhD to understand biomechanics. It's actually quite simple. So let's get started. Now it's going to look funny because I have to look behind the camera to change the slide because of course where I need to click is right there. Okay. So the first mistake that we too oftenly make is the idea of cardio. So everybody think about cardio when we're thinking about, and especially here in the maritime, in the winter, we're less active. When spring come, we want our horses to get moving again. And their first thinking is always cardio. I think this is why lunging is actually such a big hit because we just want to offer horses more minute of time that he can move his body. So the idea behind cardio, it's the idea of stamina, like developing stamina of your horse. And it is an important part of bringing your horse in shape. However, you have to think about it like quantity. And our issue with that is that, and especially when you launch the horse at a further distance away, you will work on the stamina part, but you will not be able to work on the quality of the movement. And that is often where we backtrack in our horse training, especially if you send your horse in a lot of repetitive circle that may be even too small for what they can do appropriately carrying their body. So it's definitely more a quantity thing than a quality. And you're going to see that I will talk about that a little bit more in the further slide to give you more example. But here in the conversation we have today, I will talk a lot about quality of the movement, and we're going to see the strength and the suppleness that is needed for a good quality movement. And those two words are actually bringing us right to the next slide. Okay. Okay. So in a lot of the big training barn, I seen and heard stories that they would have, I don't know, I would say 10 horses in training. And if I would ask about what they do with those 10 horses, the answer will always be the same. And I believe that this is one of the typical reason why a lot of us are either very successful with bringing our horses in a better shape versus another horse that we may be less successful. It's not necessarily because we're good or bad, it's because that we do not have diversity in our training. So basically, if your horse doesn't fit in the training mold that you have selected, he will not be successful, and you can even think less of that horse, not because he can do, but because his need is very different. So here for you, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let me try this again. Okay. And let's pop that again. Okay. Oh, perfect. Even brought me right there. I don't know exactly what it looked like for you, but for me, I am trying to, oh, perfect. Place the camera to see me where it's not bothering the slide. Okay. Um, so here in front of you guys, you have two different horses. Okay, so I really want you to see it like the picture of the scale I had here in the center. And they are basically the two opposite type horse body type that you can have out there. So all of your horses should be somewhere between those two. So on the right, we have our overly supple horse, and on the left, we have our overly strong. One is not better than the other. However, the perfect horse that is capable of carrying a horse and rider with ease, stand right in the center of that scale. So if you look at the picture, both sides are even. So the idea would be wherever your horse stand in that axle of either overly supple or overly strong, our goal is always to aim to have it right in the center. So I'll start on the right with the gray Arabian here. For overly supple side, and note here that we may think that it's breed specific, but not always. The overly supple horse is used to move in what I will call the maximum of range of extension. It is a horse that has absolutely no problem to extend, use all his body as his maximum. In fact, his weakness is a little bit on the opposite in the idea that they're so huge to execute movement to like the extent to all the way that their leg can stretch, all the way her neck can stretch, that it can be very difficult for them to do anything less than that. And in fact, core strength is usually a big weakness in those horses. So if we look at the picture of a Arabian here, we'll see that in typical Arabian fashion, neck is high and extended. And then if you look at the way he stand behind, like it's very elongated in his body, and his hind leg is not underneath himself, but very further out to the point that it actually tilt his pelvis. Um, and then you see his tail tipping a little bit outward. So this position is a good example of how far he brought the extension of his body. And unfortunately, um, because those type of horses tend to do that on a regular basis, this is just how they move. As an example, Arabian horses in general has a lot of tension in the lower back area from it because their body lack the support to have like core strength enough to keep this area here supported and secure. Um, and that's unfortunately for that breed, one of the reasons why we see 12 years old Arabian with very hollowed back, unfortunately. Now, person that are able to pinpoint those natural weaknesses can definitely make sure to present to them exercise to make sure that they revisit and that core strength that they need on a regular basis. But it's kind of part of the natural package to expect horses in the more supple ways to have a chance to have tension in the lower back more than others or hollow back. It's also what cause kissing spine if you want to go a little bit deeper into that. There's good and bad for both. So that is our situation for our supple side. So now let's go to our overly strong. So our overly strong is anything drafty, Fior, Hellfinger, Gypsy horses. And again, I do know some gypsies that are actually quite supple, but most, if we want to think about breed typical, just to give you like a mental picture, those heavy build horses tend to be on the overly strong side. So the good part about the overly strong side is that because they are naturally collected, they have that natural strength that even if you don't ride them on a regular basis, you don't have to be as scared to just jump on because they are naturally so strong that they can carry a rider with a lot more ease than others. If you think about it, back then when people were still going to war, like full armor, well, there was no such thing as tiny little horses to carry them. Everybody were riding draft horses at the time for that reason, because the horses needed to be extremely strong to carry those soldiers to war and be able to move very well as well. Now, because nothing is perfect, the issue with a strong horse. Oh, I just have somebody who can't find the link. Uh, email. Okay. The issue with our strong horse is that because they are so strong, they're not necessarily flexible. So they're stiff to the point that some of them can barely turn their head. So again, body tension in the body would come for those horses as well, but for a different reason. And it's really from being stiff in that example. So for these horses, most of the time the stiffness is carried just behind the scapula. So it's very hard to actually put your fingers between the neck and the scapula because this is one of the places that those horses carry a lot of tension. They like to pull themselves into motion, as an example. So as you see, two great part of the coin, two different challenges, two big challenges. So that gives you the black and the white option, and then it's up to you to feel where your horse fall into that axle. Now, once you have identified your horse between those two opposite, comes the idea of cross training. What do you need to know to bring your horse to that perfect center? Because for a perfect riding horse, we need it to be supple, but we also need them to be strong. So, and you probably have guessed it from here. The horse on the right, or natural supple horse, need to learn to be strong. Her natural strong horse need to learn to be supple. He need to experience with time and practice different range of motion and visit them oftenly enough so that he doesn't remain stiff. And the opposite goes for a supple horse. So this is the idea that I'm going to talk about tonight when I mean cross training. It's basically aiming your training into what your horse is not so good at so that eventually it become balance. Okay. If you do have question, guys, don't be shy. I am going to send the link to that person and then we will go back to it. And why is it not working? Hmm. Nancy, are you still there? Okay. Okay, got it. Perfect. It's great when you have an assistant, but it's not my case tonight. All right, next slide. So, same amount of rep. That is also one that I place way too much time on it. So, the amount of time that I was very particular at counting the amount of time that I would do an exercise on one side to then make sure that I would do the same amount of rep on the other side was probably spending way too much energy. As usual, I would say it come from a good place. However, our mistake there is that we see the horse already as a balance being, when in fact, there's not a horse in the world that uses body equally from the right to the left. Moving is actually a pattern of habit, just like we are right-handed or left-handed. And that is just an example on how it determine how, without thinking, you're going to do things in your regular routine, constantly using my example here, the same hands. So is your horse. I am 100% sure that I would never meet a horse when playing, running around with his buddy that count the amount of stride or canter he does on the right versus on the left. There's probably a bigger amount of chance that this horse is cantering on the same side 80% of the time. And those are actually clues because you can chart your horse because that would mean that that horse in the field, if he is cantering on the left lead most of the time, then you know that his weakness would be to practice the right lead because you know that each time he play with his buddy, he is practicing that left lead. So you can lope on the left if you want to. But if your purpose in the arena today is to train, you don't even have to worry about the left lead because it's probably at a higher place than the quality of your right lead. So your training should match your horse's weaknesses. And weaker part will need more repetition, 100%. As an example, I actually don't only work with horses, I have an office job here. And because I like to torture myself, I decided that I wanted to be as good using the mouse at my computer with my left hand than my right hand. It was definitely torture, especially for somebody who does spreadsheet. However, now after years of torturing myself to only work the mouse with my left hand, I am today better with my left hand than my right hand. But I was smart about it because I knew that my right hand was naturally had more dexterity, therefore would have been a lot better at using the mouse than my left hand, which I look pretty much like a cripple. It definitely took a whole lot more repetition than when my right. However, now, and that is such a cool moment when it happened, my natural behavior has now changed as I am seeking the mouse with the left hand. Even if I go to somebody else's office, I will seek to do the things with my weaker side. So it only took a year, but it's pretty cool. And I did saw that in horse training with my personal horses and client horses as well. For horses that I will work on a regular basis, I would tend to see that about once a year. And that's usually a party time when it happened. Another thing I want to say about weaker part repetition. So the weak areas definitely need more repetition to come to a point where they will even out with the other one. However, You cannot train past muscle memory. So you have to be a little bit smarter in your training. So let's say, for example, back to our horses that played in the field, what is canter? So he was constantly working with his left lead canter. Great. So that means we have to focus on his right lead. The horse may be able to offer us, I'm just throwing a number here, 5 canter stride on the right lead, and they're good quality. Perfect. Ask him for those 5, reward, that's great. Then go do something else. Come back to it. Go do something else. Come back to those 5. So accumulate your 5 stride so that maybe the next session you can ask for 6. Maybe the next week he'll be able to do a few more of those 6 repetition. But try as much as possible to accumulate the good one, and you can push a little bit the outer wall of where it get hard, but he can still perform it better. But then you need to leave it, because once you push past that muscle fatigue, you're done for. Because if you keep pushing your horse to action what is hard for him past that muscle fatigue, you're actually going to shoot yourself in the foot, because then you will be training compensation pattern. That is what we call looking like he's doing the thing, but he's absolutely not. I'm not going to talk too much about that right now because I think that's the next slide. Let's see. Yes. So the train what you want versus not what you don't want idea. That is actually a great way to place it that I love. That Warwick Schiller used in his book Principle of Training. If you guys like to read, it's not a big book, it's very small, but it's very valuable. It is probably the smallest horse training book I have read so far, but by far the best. So definitely recommend it. Um, so I did talk about muscle fatigue, and I have an example for you on that. Um, for when I was in horse school getting my first sets of certification, I've been told that it was very good and it would help the horse to get trained faster to use some kind of devices. And there's plenty of devices on the market. Anything that is there to said to go faster kind of come with a yellow or red warning, because there's a way to use it properly, but most of us, because we just lack the awareness or the focus, tend to actually push it to the point where we're training what we don't want. So I'm going to take an example as German reins, because that's one of the devices that I used the most in the past. So the idea of the German rein, just like most of all of them, whichever one you want to talk about, is to show the horse a certain body posture. So each time that the horse walk, um, there's some kind of pressure on his mouth, unfortunately, that will ask him to lower his neck, which for a young horse, especially the one who have a tendency to have a body posture more like a deer in the headlight, it can be a way to make him see that, hey, when you walk, your head can be a little bit lower. However, the problems come is that most of us would put the device and then leave it there for too long. So good horse training is like watching paint dry. You are accumulating at first the second and then the minute of good posture. It's very important that you reward those minutes of good posture when they arise and try to stop the train before your horse fall in muscle fatigue and then train what you don't want. So as an example, if you have a horse that can carry a healthier posture to carry a rider, let's say for 5 minutes. And I'm being generous here because if it's a young horse, it's going to be second, but let's say 5 minutes. And if you work that horse with the device for 15, and 15 would not be a big session, after that 5 minute, your remaining 10 minutes would actually be you training your horse to find a way to keep moving, but not taking half of his face off because he can't get to technically like fully out of the position, but finding a way to compensate, but to still be able to remain in some kind of posture that the device force him to. So that would be what you train for your 10 minute at a time versus what you train for your 5 minutes at a time. So in no time, you would have accumulate in the pot. The wrong posture would have become a lot stronger than the posture that you were actually looking to aim. So better you would have used the device for 5 minutes and then remove it than actually making it last too long and then bypass your muscle fatigue and get to a whole lot of different trouble because those um that training will last. Either that's what you wanted or not. Like if you're training the compensation system, you are still training it. And those body posture can definitely remain with the horse a whole time, a long time, especially if it become his behavior of moving, because then the horse is not even aware that he's placing himself in that position. It's just become automatic. Okay. So other things as well, two other example. I did talk about lunging before. Great for cardio. Just be careful of how your horse move. If you have a horse that is on the overly strong type of body type, you may want to be careful in those tiny circle because it can definitely put them in a position where they're going to try to compensate a lot because of their lack of flexibility, as an example. Pole work. Pole work is also type of training that we like to use when we put our horses in shape. It could be great or it can be a disaster. So if your horse naturally has the tendency to go over pole and think about stretching over it, and you can see them pick up their abs and their back remain strong, amazing, great workout. However, if you have one of those horse, probably 50% of the group um, in a herd that go over pole, but that actually kind of jackknife his body, so head very high, hollow his back, and then instead of picking up their abs, you would see them like a beer belly over the pole. Absolutely stop it. And you can either not use the poles or um, teach them to stretch. Most people are very successful for most type of horses to teach horses to stretch with a target. And it's just to ask them to follow the target with their nose, and you put the target kind of lower until they touch it. And you can do that while they are crossing over the pole. So then they will associate the posture you're asking and the poles, and it will become, again, their natural behavior. But please do not let your horses go over the pole like deer in the headlight because you are not giving their body any favor and you're not giving yourself either any favor from training that posture. Okay. We are actually at the last slide right now. So guys, if there is some questions, you can either unmute or type in the chat. And if not, I will keep going. All right, let's keep going. So saddling up too soon. So I'm going to keep it hairy for this one. Not going to talk about which age you should ride your horses. What I'm talking about here is, again, thinking about the fact that most of us during the winter, we don't do much and we slowly start in the spring to be active in summer. However, for a lot of us, we tend to forget to think about, is the horse's back currently ready to support me? Is it strong enough right now? And for how long? We've seen at the very beginning, depending on where your horse are on their scale there, some horse may be ready right away to carry you for a few minutes or even an hour, depending on how strong they are. Some other horse would need some conditioning. And another thing that was like mind blowing for me that I want absolutely to share with you all is the fact that I haven't teach my horses until not that long ago that pressure is something that you can lean into sometimes. So, especially for the people out there that are big on horsemanship and manners and that seek sensitivity on their horses, it is great. I am definitely there. However, I noticed that I did such a good job with my horses, teaching them to release to pressure, that it became a problem when I would place a saddle on and sit on, because then my horse was seeking to release the pressure from the pressure of the saddle as well. And that is also something I see a lot with young horses. That horses that naturally, if I look at them move, they have great body posture naturally, but then you put the saddle on, oops, and they become a little hollow, even if you actually took the time to work with their back. But it's just them not knowing that they can actually push through, and they should push through the weight and the pressure, I guess, of the saddle to keep their back strong. If you are excited about that, I do have a few-second video of me doing it with Sparkle a while back. So let me just jump out of this for a moment. And that is ready. Jump in right here. Let's see if I can bring that better. Okay. So here I'm going to share with you one of my favorite exercise. I call it tail to the wall, and it's the typical exercise that I teach now all of my horses, especially my baby, because I want him to know that some pressure, I will ask you to move away from it, but from some other pressure, I will willingly ask you to push into it. Okay. Okay. So this one right here. So what I did that I actually worked my very shy horse to discover with her tail to back up in the wall. Once the horse is still with the wall, if I ask her to find some energy there, I would place a little bit of pressure on the halter towards her chest. And then you will see me use my whip just kind of at the tip of the tail for create energy and her to pick up her abs and push up. So if you look at this part over here, you should see her become very stronger for a few seconds right there. Yeah. So that's probably I would say on the second year that I started working with Sparkle. And that was one of the exercise that really changed the way that she carry herself. Now, as you upgrade with that exercise, you eventually ask the horse to do the same, but without the crotch of the wall once they get the idea of what you're looking for. That exercise can also be developed in something as fancy as a school halt or a rear. However, it is a great exercise, just as with the wall, if even if you're not upgrading. All right, let's get back to our original slide. There you go. Okay. So yeah, basically, as I said before, we are accumulating the amount of good posture by minutes, really. So if you know that your horse's back is strong enough right now to place the saddle on, still has a good posture, perfect. You may be able to get on, but don't go riding for a 3 hour ride the first time, expecting your horse to be able to carry you, support you as strongly as if he would have work the whole winter. Really take it slowly. And just like I gave you an example before with practicing your canter, there's absolutely no shame, and you would get so much more at, let's say your horse can carry you for 15 minutes, ride 15 minutes, then jump off, do something else, and then come back to it. Like do something on the ground for fun, do some liberty or whatever you want to do, and then get back on for another 15 minutes. So that way you know that you would have trained the good muscle, the good posture for those two session of 15 minutes in my example here. And you would get a whole lot more in the better direction out of your training session if you work like that. Okay. All right, folks. We are already at the end of this session. You guys have been very quiet. However, if there's question that you would like to ask, and it could be anything, now is the time. Um, yeah, you can either unmute yourself or type in the chat. No problem, Nick. I didn't even saw that you signed in, so I guess you didn't have any problem. Perfect. And Nancy is here today. Perfect. Nancy, I called on you because I thought that you could save my life and send the link to Allison, but she figured it out. She found it. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So you can ride, then take a break, do some of your Liberty stuff, and then ride another little bit. You will gain a whole lot more out of it, I'm sure. Um, And your horses are definitely on the stronger side, so I'm pretty sure that you won't have to do that for a long time, but to start with. it's easier on the human too. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, so I'll wait a little bit to see if there is more question coming in. Other than that, if you like the conversation we had tonight, if you would like to learn more, there's definitely opportunity for you to work with me or to get some more knowledge. So first one, definitely follow me on social media. I try to share a little bit of information on what I do, the journey with my horses and my client horses, and have now I will have actually a monthly webinar for session like we're having tonight. And actually, I haven't decided on what's going on next month yet, but I was thinking of sending a poll. So if you do have suggestion, that would be the moment to send it. But basically, I do work with groups or private session. I can do like one-on-one if you're in the mountain area. However, I also have a big line of online services. I have webinar. I do have actually a 4 hours webinar on biomechanics. So on my Train Smarter program. There's also clinic, and I also work personally with people who really want to aim on getting their horses what the dressage rider calls straight. So that is my body alignment training. So basically, if you send me videos of your horses moving just as you walk them on the line, I will evaluate their habits of moving, and then we will focus a training routine very specifically for your horse weaknesses. And then we meet either bi-weekly or monthly to assess how it goes. And then we bring him to greatness. All right. Thank you for the positive comment, everyone. Alrighty. Well, if there's not more question, I hope that you enjoyed the conversation we had tonight. It may feel like a lot, and it's totally normal because it blew my mind the first time that I heard about it. But if you walk out of this today and learn one new thing that you can apply and try for yourself and see result, then it was definitely worth it. So thank you very much for your time tonight. Thank you for your nice comment. I am looking forward to see you again. Have a great evening, guys. See ya.